So this is part B of the television broadcasting on October 2023. Just for the record. Now today's edition, the part B of the Khoodeelaar television channel, takes a look at the very irresponsible, unethical, very immoral, and very corrupting encouragement to incestuous suggestions by the racist Rupert Murdoch's Scum on Sunday. Scum on Sunday in the news, racist bigot Madeley posing alongside his daughter Chloe. Now, Richard Madeley's record with Chloe in terms of promotions in the media is a very long one and very, very questionable one. And anyone with any sense would have understood that that kind of promotion would raise questions, valid questions in the public interest, moral interest. While in the magazine, this Scum on Sunday magazine has got Amanda Holden in the hot seat. And the highlight on the cover of that magazine, real life, my toy boy is the same age as my son. Now, what on earth is her toy boy being of the same age as her son to do with anything? Except to encourage something sick making. This is not decent. This is indecent, immoral, unethical. It's not an achievement. It's the opposite. So when the various versions of the sexual predators come out, for example, the version that includes an account by one of Russell Brand's victims recalling that Brand in effect groomed her and groomed her into telling people that she was his niece or something similar. What is the difference between that and a parent, biological parent apparently, boasting about the sexual closeness or proximity between their kind of sexual relations and their kind of very near biological kind of sex based biological achievements? As we have said, the moral state of the British media is corrupt. The moral state of the British judiciary is corrupt. The judiciary, in terms of the sexual perversion of the judiciary, is contained in literally dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds of incidents where mainly male judges, typified by the one who found the wife of a criminal, Jeffrey Archer, fragrant, fragrant Mary Archer. That is fucking stupid. This judge was obviously fucking besotted. What was there in Mary Archer's appearance that could so enchant this moron, except to devalue the ethical and moral independence and objectivity that he was supposed to uphold? Then there was this judge in the case, Jeremy Thorpe. And the Jeremy Thorpe judge, or the Jeremy Thorpe court trial judge, was so obscene that Peter Cook made a memorable video lasting about 6 or 7 minutes that will remain, it will outlast the moron's biological passing. What did he say? If we can find the text of the transcript of the Peter Cook now there is this That is Peter Cook calling Jeremy Thorpe Mrs. Thorpe and his wife Miriam his husband. Now, clearly, there is no blame attaching to Miriam Thorpe. And throughout the trial, the actual trial, Miriam was treated just like Mary Archer was treated by Jeffrey Archer's trial judge. Complete undeserved deference. So the look at prime ministers are corrupt. And when it comes to the behavior of DEFRA, what do we find in the evidence? Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. That's a pack of lies. It is not for environment, for rural affairs. Against them, position attempt for actual truth. When the three judges that we have been mentioning, one is the district court judge, District Judge Layton, then followed by Murray in the High Court, and finally by he was followed eventually by Griffiths in the High Court in July 2001, 2021, sorry, July 2021, 29 July 2021. What Griffiths said summed up the absolute evil criminality on the part of the judges. Criminality in supporting the lies of the DEFRA department and the DEFRA confectors of lies against baby angel Geronimo. They accepted, Griffiths accepted, Murray accepted, Layton accepted that baby angel Geronimo was in perfect, fit, healthy condition. That baby angel Geronimo was never infected, never ever was infected with bovine tuberculosis. Having said that, they said, and as summarized by Griffiths, the ultimate liar, the final liar in court, the Secretary of State was entitled to ignore the evidence, ignore the facts. So, in one sitting, Griffiths, the criminal, disbanded, abolished, destroyed the whole concept and foundation of the judiciary, of common law. He said, in paraphrased words, that baby angel Geronimo was indeed primed, that biologically interfered with before his so called test by the criminals under the auspices, under the aegis of DEFRA, and that definitely interfered with the result of the test, which was the opposite of what would have been the result had there been no interference, chemical interference with the biological being of baby angel Geronimo. But having said all of that, the criminal liar Griffith said, but the Secretary of State is entitled to ignore evidence and fact. It's brazen as that, is as brazen as that, as dark ageist as that. There are women on the Scum on Sunday and on the Daily Mail and the Mail group that are in her 40s, in their 50s, openly gloating about the fact that at their ages they are having fantastic sex. Now, why should that be published at all? What is the point? Now, look at the millions of people in the United Kingdom, millions of women in the United Kingdom, and millions of their counterparts across the world. Let's say women who are suffering imposed poverty, malnutrition, deprivation, denial. What about them? What about them? So, who is behind their drive for promoting this obscenity, this perversion and borderline incest in the media. Harriet Harman, she's being promoted in an interview in the Sunday Times by Decca Aitkenhead. Now, there is no sign in the piece of the racist role that Harman has been playing in the Labour Party. She's incompetent and she disastrously failed when she was appointed by Tony Blair in his first regime after the 1997 election at the Department for Deprivation, Want and Poverty. She is also the racist liar who engineered the destruction of the statutory foundation of opposing racism in the United Kingdom. It wasn't an official conservative, but an official Labour member of Parliament, Harriet Harman, who destroyed the Commission for Racial Enslavement. Now, I was present in April 1997 when a former conservative member of Parliament introduced, began the Commission for Racial Enslavement at an event held in the Shoe Lane, not far from Fleet Street, in April 1997. Sorry, in April 1977. Now, the former Conservative MP was appointed to chair the Commission for Racist Enslavement by the racist James Callaghan, who was the Prime Minister. And I'll check in a minute the bit about biographical bit about this man. So the brief introduction to the CRE in this internet page says the CRE was a publicly funded, non governmental body set up under the Race Relations Act 1976 to tackle racial discrimination and promote racial equality. So it says that it was founded in November 1976, but it was actually launched in April 1977. 5 months later, So the main goals of the CRE were, according to this entry, encourage to encourage greater integration and better relations between people from different ethnic groups, to use its legal powers to help eradicate racial discrimination and harassment, to work with government and public authorities to promote racial equality in all public services, to support local and regional organizations and employers in all sectors in the efforts to ensure equality of opportunity and good race relation, to raise public awareness of racial discrimination and injustice, and to win support for efforts to create a fairer and more equal society. Now, in their defamatory reference to me, published in the Guardian in March 1992, the collection of racists, including a former chairman of the Commission for Racial Equality, Peter admitted Newsom admitted that he had instructed the staff at the entrance of the Commission for Racial Equality to prevent me entering the building. Now, it may sound hilarious, but that I was the only one on the whole, in the whole UK population that challenged the bureaucracy at the CRE. And I wanted to know about these. How were they carrying out the aims and objects of the CRE, which is where Peter Newsom and other criminals before him and after him, who sat as chair of this CRE, found the most difficult. As I have said, the secret about my questioning is that I aim to question in order to extract the truth. So, for example, in the 1960s, when I asked Zulfikar Ali Bhutto 9 questions at the Institute of Engineers in Dhaka, then in East Pakistan, I mean, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was completely, absolutely unprepared to face my questions, and unprepared to comprehend the context of this man facing Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had no idea who I was. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had no knowledge, no warning, no advance warning as to who I was or what I wanted or who if anyone, had briefed me. Shattered by my 9 questions. Similarly, whenever I appeared at the Commission for Racial Equality, which I was able to do a few times, I was the only one who asked the questions. And the chair of the Commission for Racial Equality at the time was flummoxed, completely unable to answer my questions. The only way they were able to deal with this, my questioning of them, was to find a way of making me leave. Now, how could they make me leave without looking ridiculous? So, Harriet Harman is being given the promotion in the Sunday Times by Decca Aitkenhead as extremely positive role model for womankind. But it was Harriet Harman who destroyed the Commission for Racial Equality by imposing the mental slave Trevor Terrible Phillips. Trevor Terrible Phillips was adopted by, apart from Harriet Harman, by Polly Toynbee at The Guardian. And between the two of them, these two racists endorsed this racist mental slave, Terrible Phillips, and created the monstrosity whereby Terrible Phillips has been degenerating ever since. The purpose was to destroy the Commission for Racial Equality, not to make it accountable, not to make it deliver on the main goals, but to destroy it and to remove from the narrative any reference to opposing racism, any reference at all to opposing racism. So she created the CRE monster first as chairman and then replaced it with Trevor Terrible Phillips in the chair with the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which still festers. And it is as racist as Harriet Harman wanted it, as racist as the conservative racists wanted it, as racist as the mental slave Trevor Terrible Phillips wanted it. So the official institution, the official instrument for opposing racism on a state level in the United Kingdom was scrapped by Harriet Harman. And this was done under the government fronted by Tony Blair. So when Tony Blair later mounted the attacks on Muslims, it was not accidental. It was part of the agenda, part of the narrative that he was a racist and he wanted to attack Muslims and he wanted to attack others. And there was no narrative, there was no recognition in the activities of the Commission for Racial Equality, and most certainly not anything to do with opposing racism in the subsequent degenerate body that was created in its place by Harriet Harman, by the mental slave Trevor Terrible Phillips, of the history of the racist country, history of the of racist discrimination against people of African and Asian backgrounds. The history of racism, why the people from Africa and Asia needed to come to the United Kingdom. So therefore, there is no reference to racism whatsoever in the actual kind of records of the CRE or the so-called Human Rights Equality and Human Rights Commission, because they were bereft, they were devoid of any reference to racism, because they were created. The CRE was less effectively created as a racist instrument, but the Equality and Human Rights Commission was most specifically created to destroy any idea of opposing racism. According to the Sunday Times on the HS2 fraud, here is the piece. The company in charge of constructing the HS2 railway has been accused of deliberately covering up its escalating costs to ensure politicians would keep spending billions of pounds of public money on the project. Whistleblowers from HS2 Limited have described how senior managers instructed staff to keep cost estimates artificially low. Each was sacked after trying to raise concerns. They allege that for years Parliament was not made aware of the true costs of the high speed line when it voted on laws that approved the construction. HS2's internal fraud unit is now investigating allegations that the company deliberately covered up denies wrongdoing. The revelations have emerged in a three-month investigation by the Sunday Times, which has been given access to internal HS2 emails, files, and cost calculations, as well as secret recordings of employees describing how cost figures were downplayed. HS2 insiders, former ministers, and civil servants were interviewed as part of the investigation. So the revelations have emerged in a three-month investigation by the Sunday Times, which has been given access to internal HS2 emails, files, and cost calculations, as well as secret recordings of employees describing how cost figures were downplayed. HS2 insiders, former ministers, and civil servants were interviewed as part of the investigation. When an HS2 employee was spotted meeting a whistleblower for lunch, she was called in for two interrogations by the company's internal investigators. Her phone was confiscated and she was pressed into handing over private messages from her personal social media account. A few months later, she lost the job. She lost her job. One of the whistleblowers, Stephen Cresswell, a former HS2 senior cost analyst, has made repeated attempts to alert the company's fraud department, the National Audit Office, and the cabinet ministers. He alleges The company deployed a classic playbook used on big publicly funded construction projects of holding back real information on costs until after the Department for Transport (DFT) had given approval to start work. Stephen Craswell is photographed in there. He had immediate concerns when he opened the books on phase one. One notice, one notice to proceed had been given for the next phase for work. HS2 would go back to the department and say, "Oh, we have really unlucky. We've been really unlucky. Can we have some more money? It's too late to cancel because we have dug the hole." Literally, they have dug the hole. HOLE, cross rail hole. An unfair dismissal claim he has lodged against the company alleges, quote, a criminal offense had been committed, namely fraud. HS2's lawyers replied to him in March this year to say it had considered his allegations and had concluded that no action was needed because the matters raised were subjective. The company has since reopened its investigation. HS2 Limited was set up in 2009. So HS2 Limited was set up in 2009 at the instigation of Lord Adonis, awful Adonis, who was then the Labour Transport Secretary. It is funded by public money but operates as a private company. HS2 staff work alongside representatives from the DFT. Its chief executive reports to the Transport Secretary and the Rail Minister. Since being set up, it has had four chief executives and seven chairmen. In the last financial year, HS2's chief executive was paid 600 public servants in Britain. In the 4 years, £1 billion was spent on HS2 staff that earned more than 150,000 a year. Last year, that included 43 employees. Whistleblowers allege HS2 executives had an incentive to play down figures because the project might have been scrapped if Parliament had known how costs were escalating. This was a fraud against the British people, said Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Bruce, one of the whistleblowers. Last week, Professor Stephen Geister, Glaister, a former chairman of the government's official Rail and Road Office of Rail and Road, had who has advised the DFT on HS2 said there are extremely serious allegations that suggest something has gone terribly wrong with the oversight of the HS2 project. It is clear that an independent inquiry should now be held to get to the bottom of the matter. If the true course and timescale of the project had been known beforehand, it might well have been stopped much earlier. This month, Rishi Sunak scrapped construction of the remaining northern section of HS2, leaving a line that will run only between London and Birmingham. The government's estimates suggest the remaining leg will still cost at least 50 billion, equivalent to the cost of building 100 hospitals. But independent analysts believe the total bill is more likely to be 100 billion. The consultancy Oxera, which has previously assessed the project, for the government told the Sunday Times that big infrastructure projects were usually approved only if the economic benefits were double the cost. Oxara's latest calculations, based on the government's optimistic estimate of the cost, suggest the line could make only 70% in economic benefits for each pound spent building it. So, how did Britain end up commissioning a short intercity line that will turn out to be the most expensive 100 miles of railway track constructed anywhere in the world? The whistleblowers allege that Parliament and public were not told the truth. This is their story. When Stephen Cresswell entered HS2's offices in London in 2014, preparations for the project were well underway. The high speed 2 line was going to be the fastest in Europe, carrying trains capable of reaching speeds of up to 225 miles. The first train from London to Birmingham would be completed in 2026, and the second to Leeds or Manchester along two new routes would be built by 2033. Cresswell was an experienced project risk manager who had worked on Heathrow, Thameslink, and Hinkley Point C nuclear power station in Somerset. His expertise was in forecasting the true cost of projects. Cresswell was brought in to analyze the costing of Phase 1, the London to Birmingham leg. The original estimate, excluding the trains, had been set at $37.5 billion in 2011. By 2013, this had risen to 42.5 billion, and a further 7.5 billion was added to manufacture the trains, a cost of 50 billion. When Cresswell opened the books, he was concerned. Phase 1 was expected to cost 21 billion, and yet his calculations suggested a fairer settlement was 30 billion, giving a total for the project of at least 59 billion. A discrepancy of 59 billion was enormous. Cresswell recalls there were problems with the way the figures had been calculated, and it was likely to cost an awful lot more, around 50 billion. I did the calculations pointing these out, but I was told to concentrate my efforts on something else. Cresswell was only on short term contract and left HS2. The review he worked on was published in March 2014. It made no mention of his assessment and judged the 220, the 21 billion for phase 1 to be accurate. Patrick McLaughlin was transport secretary in the coalition government in 2014 when the bill to approve phase 1 was going through parliament. Matt Hancock was the minister responsible for big projects. When concerns about the costs of taxpayers were passed to him, he responded that forecasting such projects was always challenging. Dodgy Matt Hancock. 5 weeks later, the second reading of the high speed rail to approve phase 1 was going through the Commons. Patrick McLaughlin, Transport Secretary in the coalition government, used the 21 billion figure to illustrate that the project was sticking to its budget and would recoup 2.40 in economic benefit for every pound spent. Cresswell was convinced taxpayers were being misled. In June 2015, he contacted his local MP Dominic Raab and they met in a Cuccio restaurant in Isha, near his home in Walton on Thames, in Surrey. Costs, risks, timescales, and benefits are being manipulated to suit individuals or organizational goals rather than the public interest, he wrote in a follow up email to Raab. It seems that this can be done without fear of consequence. At the same time, there are no realistic mechanism by which a civil servant or citizen can raise awareness of an issue. To do so may be ineffectual and is at great risk to the individual. Rab passed the letter to Matt Hancock, who, as Paymaster General, was the cabinet minister with responsibility for big projects. Hancock wrote back explaining that forecasting on such projects was always challenging, and he was satisfied that employees could raise concerns constructively without fear of reprisal. This would not be Cresswell's experience. One of the main reasons HS2 was proving to be expensive was because Lord Adonis, the Labour minister credited with project's creation, who later became a non executive director of HS2, earning £950 a day for 2 days a month, had wanted the railway to be super fast. To achieve this, the line had to be straight and level as possible. So tunnels would need to be cut through London and the Chiltern Hills with new bridges and viaducts. HS2 also had to undertake the biggest compulsory land purchase since the Second World War at an estimated cost of in 2013 of 1.6 billion for the London to Birmingham section. By 2015, the estimate had risen by 75% to 2.8 billion. That August, Doug Thornton, 49, a surveyor and a former director and property department of Amazon and Tesco, property departments of Amazon and Tesco, took on the 200,000 a year job, directing HS2's land and property departments. One of the first documents he read was an audit report of the accountancy firm PwC. It expressed great concern as to the methodology and composition of HS2 property cost estimate. Thornton says it had never been properly costed, he claims. He said the figures had been based on rough calculation by a consultancy company that had hired interns to pore over a map and see how many properties there might be in the arbitrarily chosen 100-meter wide strip from London to Birmingham. That was not even part of the route. He said the farm had been open about the fact. This was completely an rudimentary work. Yet the bill giving HS2 permission to build phase 1 was passing through Parliament using this valuation as its base. Thornton described how HS2 seemed to have no clear estimate identifying the number of properties to be brought or their owners compensated. Executives estimate range from 2,500 to 100,000 pounds. The true figure was 11,400, yet no budget had been set aside for 5,000 of them. So he commissioned the accountancy firm Deloitte to investigate. Its report, completed in December 2015, pointed out that the previous company had provided only rough approximations of the values of the required buildings, and these were outdated and probably seriously undervalued. Thornton was also conducting his own review. I found absolutely no justification. I found absolutely no justifiable basis for the figure that was currently being used, he says. We were finding errors cumulatively in the hundreds of millions. We were interrogating the available data and bad numbers just kept coming. He claims, as I started to express concern, I became a pariah. Thornton was planning to raise his concerns about the property costs at a meeting of HS2's board in January 2016. As a result, he says, his boss became agitated, aggressive, and argumentative. He alleges he was instructed by at present slides, a senior manager to present slides using only the original property figures, but he refused to brief the board using numbers he believed were misleading. In my view, I was either being instructed to lie or, at the very least, conceal the truth. He says, in real terms, the amounts of the same thing. That amounts to the same thing. He notified HS2 he wanted to file a grievance. 11 minutes later, he received an email from the farm's human resources director informing him he was being dismissed. Thornton says there was a clear intention to conceal information that should have been made available to Parliament and the public, which in itself went to the very heart of the viability of the project. Last week, HS2 said, in the course of updating estimates on land and property, costs have increased, and we have been completely transparent about this process. The company stated that Thornton was dismissed for inadequate performance and not because he was whistleblowing. Instinctively, I felt that what I was doing was wrong. After Thornton left, two employees claim they were told to destroy the Deloitte report. An assistant to Oliver Bain, Thornton's replacement, claims Oliver came over to me and gave me his copy of the Deloitte report and asked me to shred it. After this, I was given further copies of the report and was asked to shred those. The assistant knew Thornton had been fired. She says instinctively, I felt that I was being asked to do what I was being asked to do was wrong and part of some sort of cover up. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Bruce, who joined HS2 as the property department's head of planning and performance a few months after Thornton, says he shredded a pile of 30 copies of after being told to get rid of the report. Bruce, a British Army veteran who had been NATO's chief engineer in Afghanistan, recalls no words, phrases, pictures, or diagrams could be used. Physical printed copies were gathered up and placed in the bins marked for shedding. Staff were instructed to delete any electronic copies. Last week, HS2 and Bain said no order was given to destroy Deloitte report, and it was not shredded. It said electronic copies were retained, but the assistant and Bruce have signed witness statements detailing the shredding for a High Court legal action set to be brought against HS2 by the billionaire property tycoon Michael Gross as a result of a dispute over his rejected bid to redevelop Euston Station. I tried to tell the board, then I was sacked. So, if we look at the details of the corruption, open corruption and fraud at the HS2, take a deep look and you look at what we said about Crossrail and the lies that Crossrail was perpetrating, you can see that we actually predicted every single aspect of HS2 lies through our opposition and our diagnosis of Crossrail. And everything that Crossrail was promoting in relation to the alleged benefits that they said Crossrail would bring to the East End of London, everything that the Crossrail promoters said through the local councillors in Tower Hamlets was a lie. So if we take back all the lessons and look at the behavior of DEFRA and we look at the lies that the HS2 have been telling, Crossrail has been telling, and then extrapolate the lies and impose that lesson, the pyramid, on the behavior of DEFRA, and we can see that the lies they were confecting against baby angel Geronimo were not surprising, not unprecedented. That is how they went about doing things. They attacked the innocents and they attacked the innocents as being spreader of false rumors. When baby angel Geronimo was tested objectively before he left his place of birth, New Zealand, he tested negative, which is exactly how he should have tested because he was not in started to budge. They actually refused Helen Macdonald's request, demand, because they knew that they had interfered with him. They had chemically interfered with him and they had altered the outcome of the test, thus misrepresenting his biology. We shall be continuing this in due course.